You're listening to the Back Home Network, presented by Homefield Apparel.
Physical basketball
I was at the games.
versus
You were
physical
not.
fouling.
You watched it on YouTube.
Anyway.
I saw the game. I watched the game.
Well, we're here. I'm Bob Moats. Welcome to X's and Joe's, a podcast dedicated to decoding the winning formula in college basketball.
And I'm Mike Wiemuth, welcoming you to episode 50, Expectations for IU. What are reasonable outcomes for football and basketball? Recorded on the afternoon of Wednesday, January 14th, 2026. So, Robert, in about 48 hours from now exactly, hopefully you'll be picking me up on time at the Indianapolis airport to shuttle me back to Bloomington.
I have every intention of getting you right as you're hitting the front part of the terminal of Indianapolis International Airport, and then looking at you and thinking, we really kind of screwed this up, because here we are bringing you back to Indiana this weekend when you and I could literally be sitting on Miami Beach at that exact same time, getting ready for the IU football national championship game. I would have even said, let's just find, we could have done a Holiday Inn Express in Stewart, found a sports bar in IU garb, and called it good enough. But it's got, I haven't checked the weather reports down there, but it can't be 22 degrees with a 25-mile-an-hour wind blowing and knocking the hat off my head.
Yeah, exactly. No, when were these plans made for the Back Home Network meetup? It had been months ago, I believe. So it was not even in our radar screen to think about, wait a minute, this could be the national championship game for football.
There was a conversation sometime. It may have been actually when you were back, when we were doing the Crimson Cast thing. I think it may have been around that
September.
same time where we looked at when the basketball schedule came out, and we had always kind of, this usually happens in February, usually the first couple weekends of February, and there was just so much other stuff, and usually it conflicts with the Super Bowl, and that's can sometimes be an issue for some folks. But no, I mean, we just kind of found ourselves in a position where it's like, well, the meetup's then, let's just I went ahead and got the hotel room, we had all that squared away, we got everything kind of going in that direction, and then all of a sudden, I don't think, because when we base this on the conversations we had at the beginning of football season, no one really thought by any stretch of the imagination that this was feasible, meaning like you should plan around this.
Right, exactly.
Not to say that wasn't possible, not to say we don't want it to happen, but more or less like if you're looking at like when you're going to schedule your kid's birthday party, you're not going to say, well, the National College Football Championship is that Monday. I can't schedule Bennett or Noah's birthday or activities around this, because I'm probably not going to make plans. I'm not booking my travel agent plans to Miami for that weekend.
Right.
So here we are, and so we're here, and we'll just, I don't know, maybe just see if they can turn heat up at the Briar of the Burley to make it like 85 degrees or something, so we can get some car.
Go say tropical feeling as we're watching our friends text us from the Fontainebleau Hotel or by the pool.
Do you have this okay, so you and I going way back, and when you think of Miami, sometimes I think of Don Johnson and Philip Michael Thomas. Okay, sometimes I think of that. But a lot of times I think of Jackie Gleason live from Miami Beach, and Nixon in 68 and 72 at the conventions down there, and all these polyester pantsuits running around, retirees, or my favorite is the James Bond Goldfinger. When they start with Goldfinger, and you have that brassy opening with them going into, what was that, a Hilton there? That one on
I think that was literally the Fontainebleau Hotel, what I mentioned. I think that was actually used in Goldfinger, which was sort of the Sinatra and the mob kind of hangout back in the 40s and 50s. So.
Right.
Yeah, no,
So I mean,
no, I was totally on board with you and think the same thing as like during the Fiesta Bowl matchup, I was thinking like, the outcome of this game will determine whether Bob and I would be delving into movie references from either Mississippi Burning or Scarface. And so obviously, like, I've been brushing up on my Tony Montana quotes, this week. So
say hello to my little friend.
yeah, yeah. No, you're right. I mean, Miami has so many different like reference points, but yeah, I mean, it's usually something like it's like Scarface or Miami Vice. Yeah, yeah. I'm trying to think like what other like Gloria Estefan videos, I guess.
Yeah, we're talking Miami Sound Machine here, aren't we? Like,
Yeah.
80s. I mean, you can make Birdcage references also.
That
I mean,
one, yeah,
that's
like
another one.
Birdcage. That's an underrated film. Like
That's a
Birdcage, like
very underrated film.
Nathan Lane and Robin Williams and
Gene
Gene
Hackman.
Hackman. It was fantastic casting for that. Yeah, I was trying to explain to somebody who's not a football fan, like this whole IU and Miami sort of like online war that's kind of going on. Because I remember like as soon as that Ole Miss game, Miami game ended, and of course, IU, when the IU was up safely in the Oregon game, one of my first thoughts was like, oh man, the next like 9 days are gonna be hell online between the IU fan base and the Miami like Twitterverse. Because growing up as a guy that used to follow Florida State and Bobby Bowden, as I did when I was a teenager, I knew Miami football culture intimately. And so it's just kind of knowing that. So I was explaining to someone I know who's not really into football, but they're really big into music. And I was trying to explain to them sort of like the cultural contrast here between IU and Miami. And I told them, I was like, well, there used to be two musical acts that financially supported both of these programs. On one side, you had John Mellencamp, and on the other, you had Luther Campbell and Two Live Crew. So it's literally so you think it's literally Jack and Diane versus Me So Horny.
Me So Horny. You're right. Right. When I saw Luther popped up, I'm like, I remember being like 13, 14 years old and not knowing what I was going at, but knowing full well they were trying to keep it out of record stores, and me wanting that cassette tape, not even a CD, a cassette tape of Nasty As They Want to Be, because I thought, you know what? I just want to have that as a badge of honor that I own banned material. I'm going to stick it next to my copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, not realizing it's like what this really was at 14. And if I played it around my grandmother, I probably would have been disowned. Or
what did they say?
Least, I don't know. What is that? Or some of that, even at that age, what does that word even mean? It's like, but
you remember they had that ripoffs. They sampled Born in the USA. And they made it into the song Banned in the USA, and they used basically Bruce Springsteen's like beat for the song. So yeah, but people don't get, like, if you watch The U on the 30 for 30 special by ESPN, I mean, they really kind of go into that. It's like, I mean, like, Luther Campbell was not a small figure in Miami football culture in like the late 80s and early 90s. So.
Well, and I go back to that same era, and we were both growing up in Indiana, and how many of our friends, were big Notre Dame fans.
Right.
And like the badge of honor for a kid in a high school who was a Notre Dame fan was to wear your Catholics versus Convicts t-shirts every Friday.
Yeah.
As a game day prep. It was like, you just saw that, and you knew it's like, this is really funny. And it's almost like we get a chance to revisit that after all these years. Yeah. That sort of almost visceral hatred that we had towards that Jimmy Johnson, Dennis Erickson era of Miami football.
Michael Irvin, Benny Blades, going down the list. Melvin Bratton, the whole crew.
Vinny Testaverde.
Thrill Hill.
Yep. Oh yeah. Just this whole like litany of dudes, and just remember seeing fights in the tunnel at Notre Dame Stadium, as they were getting ready to go on the field. It was a bitter rivalry to say the least. So that's a good, which is kind of a good place to start. Which, when you really kind of think about T-shirts and you really kind of think about that sort of culture around that, iconic retro-esque.
Yeah.
Mike, do we know somebody who does that?
I would say Homefield Apparel.
Yeah, I think we do. Now, they don't have that one, but they have an amazing selection of that era of T-shirt battles that you have between programs.
Oh, absolutely. And also, I would make a special note to our Purdue friends. Homefield Apparel does have the widest selection of vintage Miami Hurricanes attire on the market. So if you're meeting your John Purdue Club pals at Harry's on Monday for the championship game, you don't want to be the only guy in the bar not wearing orange and green of the Hurricanes.
Get your what is it? What is that thing? Is it a pelican? What is their bird? I can't remember what
it's
their
an
bird
ibis.
Is. Ibis.
Sebastian the ibis.
Sebastian. What the hell is an ibis?
Well, it's basically
stupid,
it's basically like a tropical bird. I mean, the story is, I believe the mascot came from there's a big hurricane, like a century ago, and the last bird, I guess, that was standing when they were coming back to do the cleanup was this ibis, and so that kind of became the symbol of the University of Miami's. Like it stands strong amidst the hurricane.
I think I prefer the Hoosier backstory.
Yeah.
This scavenger bird hanging around, like eating whatever's on the beach. So yeah, check out www.homefieldapparel.com, or if you happen to be with us for the meetup, which we hope to see you there. If you're not going to, be in a Hawaiian shirt and a bowling shirt with your shorts and flip flops.
Yeah.
Feel free to check them out at Tracks on Kirkwood, Homefield Apparel. So on that note, let's just real quick about the last, because we talked about the Rose Bowl in our last episode as we kind of did one of these little midweek check-ins that we're doing. The Peach Bowl, and you had the most apt description of those old Peach Bowls, which was watching them come out of that old Fulton County Stadium dugouts onto the field.
Yeah, it didn't feel like it was designed as a pure sort of like football experience. Because I remember, I think if you go on YouTube and you look at I think it was the 90 IU versus Auburn Peach Bowl, and you can find at the beginning of the game where it shows like the Auburn players coming out from the Atlanta Braves dugout. I was like, wow, I remember seeing that as a kid. It's like, wow, this does not feel like a natural. This is not like the Rose Bowl. You feel like this is a football experience. So, yeah. So you're right. That was like strange because IU did play 2 times in the Peach Bowl, but it didn't have like the same grandeur back then, because now it kind of got incepted on the same level today as like the Rose Bowl, Fiesta Bowl, and all that. But back then it was more like, yeah, this is like the 5th best bowl of the day behind the Rose, the Sugar, the Cotton,
Well, oftentimes when they even played on New Year's, it was like the 30th of December, or the one that IU played in '87 was January 2nd. I remember that.
Right.
It was the day after everything was settled.
Yeah.
And IU got a chance to play in that game. I also I do remember Reggie Cobb breaking the touchdown in '87 and breaking my heart because I loved that team so much. I don't remember the '90 game as much because I think I try to remember more that Copper Bowl and the Liberty Bowl that was in between them.
Right.
That just in that era, but it was nice, to kind of just see that exorcism in so many ways, and really just there's a moment where I want to give a shout out to the IU to IU fans everywhere, especially the ones that were at the Peach Bowl. When I saw that we drank the beer, we tapped out the beer at the Peach Bowl by halftime. Like halftime, there wasn't a Coors Light or a Mick Ultra to be had in the stadium.
Exactly.
And it's like that, we should hang a banner for that up at upstairs, Nick's, Kilroy's. We should have like just on Kirkwood, just say beer, tapped out the Peach Bowl beer by halftime fan base.
Yeah. And you consider the fact that the team you beat in that game was the University of Oregon, which was the inspiration basis for Animal House.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
We out Animal House.
Yes, exactly.
It's impressive. It's impressive.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I remember when IU went to the Final Four in 2002, the Atlanta folks said, yeah, IU is like of the Final Four fan bases, it was like half IU, 35% like Kansas, and the rest was like Maryland and whoever.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, you think about it, like you look at Indiana in the winter. Why the hell do you want to be here? It's like,
Right,
and I'm
right.
15 now, so I'm like, it's cold. It is windy. I'm not saying other places don't, aren't the same way, but I mean, we have this sort of thing where we like to travel. We like to get out of the state, and we did it to Atlanta. We did it to Pasadena. It sounds like we're going to do the same thing in Miami. I think people are going to be surprised at just how even that crowd's going to be.
Yeah, I think it's going to be 60-40, possibly IU. I don't think, I think, Miami's going to get, a decent chunk of their fan base there. They're going to gobble up some percentage of the corporate tickets that will be coming through just from locals and all that. But yeah, as I said, like Miami, they don't have they have a lot of fans, but not many alumni. And there's a lot of casuals. I think there could be a ton of people in and around the stadium wearing Miami gear, but not necessarily in the stadium, if you know what I mean.
That makes sense. Yeah, basically they're there for the pre-party at
Yeah. Believe me, if you're going to bars like on the weekend, it will not be like Atlanta. There's gonna be tons of Miami green and orange around town. But in the stadium itself, yeah, I can see IU having advantage.
So wear your flak jackets accordingly, and remember that you drink beer out of a bottle because it can be used to get you out of a tough situation if you need it.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's really interesting because it's like we're kind of watching this IU as the favorite, as the new evil empire. Like we're living in that world, and I think the two beatdowns that we saw. That's definitely. I know it's moving the betting lines. It's moving the prediction lines. It looks like IU is seen as a 2-score favorite in this game right now.
Yeah, I think most places have it about 8.5 right now, which I mean that's not totally crazy if you think about it.
No.
I mean, if you're looking at, let's say, like the way gamblers typically look at things, they like to look at recent history and how much did a team perform relative, let's say, to the lines. Like, are they beating the spread by 5 points, 10 points, 20 points? IU beat Alabama by 27 points above the spread, and Oregon by 31 points above the spread. So it's going to be really difficult, I think, for the odds makers to come into this game and say, like, okay, well, I think it's really an even game with Miami, given that Miami is like the 10 seed. I mean, Miami is definitely doing better, but yeah, I think that's why when the spread came out, it opened at 7.5, minus 7.5 IU, and then immediately within 48 hours is up to 8.5, which probably means that a lot of, or at least a decent chunk of early sharps jumped in on IU. And that like pushed the line up. And so I if I were a betting person, I probably would have done the same.
So yeah, there's a lot to be kind of said there with and the narratives around how IU plays football. And this is actually, we're setting up a conversation about basketball here, using this in many respects. That the only thing that gives me a little bit of hesitancy is the whole thing of, there have been so many times where you feel like there's a program or a team going into a game like this that seems to have every single advantage on the checkbox box.
Yeah.
Checked. And then some weird stuff happens.
Well,
I think it's part of the fun of being a fan, honestly, where you have that emotional investment of like, okay, let's just, if everything goes right, we're going to be fine. But you're always in the back of your head, but something always go wrong. Yeah. And that's okay. It's exciting to be in that position where you're actually like, wow, we're not sitting here to have 54 things break a certain way for us to win.
Yeah.
That you really have multiple options, multiple pathways to victory. Like we talked about this with the Oregon game. Like there are more feasible roads for IU to win a national football championship than there are Miami coming into this game. Just like there were more feasible roads for IU to win the national semifinal than there were for Oregon.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, I think the odds as stated by the odds makers right now are probably about correct. I think Miami has about a 20 to 25% chance of winning the game. Because I can think of about for every 20 scenarios, I can think of how this game could go down. 5 of them involve Miami winning the game. But obviously but I can think of 15 for every 5 where IU wins the game. And I think you notice that the narrative you hear on ESPN and on the podcasts and things like that, there's a kind of interesting consistency to them. I think the main thing you hear on the pro Miami side, which is a valid one, but we can talk about how valid, is the offensive defensive line advantages that Miami might have, which is true. I mean, let's say this: Bain and Mesidor, the defensive ends for Miami, are really good. Bain is probably going to be a top 10 pick in the NFL draft this coming spring and summer. Mesidor is going to be up there too. They have a very violent hitting defense.
Right.
They have probably the best tackle in college, or one of the best tackles in college football in Maigoa. Malachi Tony is probably the most exciting young wide receiver in college football. I mean, he makes Odell Beckham Jr. catches like with eerie regularity anymore. So all that's true, but you hear like on top of that argument is that, well, Indy has not played a team like Miami yet this year. Now, I guess that's debatable on the merits. Like, okay, fine, let's stipulate that. But doesn't that same logic also apply in reverse?
Yeah.
Like, has Miami played a quarterback like Mendoza? Have they faced a better D coordinator than Bryant Haynes, or a better cover corner than D'Angelo Pons, and on down the list? And it's asking of a team that's already lost 2 games already. I mean, I can't say for sure how IU would have fared against Louisville at home, but I'm reasonably sure they would not have lost to Louisville the way Miami did.
Yeah, I would agree. And again, you always leave out the idea that you can have a bad game or an off game or a game that things just don't break your way, or
Right.
you run into bad luck plus some lack of execution that things on your end.
Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, I think a lot of it's just this kind of, so much of this may be justification of a system that's been in place for so long and a way of thinking. We go back to the Moneyball conversation frequently, that what this threatens is it does kind of threaten a way of doing business with IU, which is where the cheating allegations now come into play. Like people just throwing stuff up on 14 thread tweets, trying to say, well, this just doesn't add up, because you're looking at it from a prism of what was versus what is versus what could be and will be.
Yeah, right, exactly.
And it did happen. It's happened this way. It's working this way. So in so many respects, it's a question that I have, that, how trustworthy can you be if you're still just kind of looking at this from a standpoint of, well, they haven't been tested. Well, I don't know. Last time I checked, Ohio State, Oregon, Alabama are your last 3 games, and you've won all 3. And 2 of them, you boat raced a playoff team out of a bowl game.
Yeah.
So at this point, like, it wasn't like Miami was resounding against Ole Miss, I might add.
Yeah.
It wasn't like that was just an absolute just blast off. It was more of a, so as we kind of go through these games and we kind of go through the mindset, it's like, what I get it. I get that you're trying to justify this, and you're trying to build the drama on it. And I'm not saying it's going to be a blowout. I'm not saying it's going to be this, or I'm not saying it's anything. It's just as much as a matter of rationally, you got to think that it's like, who has more weapons?
Yeah, exactly, Bob. And you're right. I think there's a tendency to we sort of fit into these like fan fallacies, even as people who are claiming to be neutral observers. that you see on, let's say, podcast and on like the ESPN shows. Like they'll glom onto one variable where they think that their team has an advantage, and then they'll take that one advantage and sort of inflate it way beyond its actual proportional impact on the game.
Right.
So if you take, let's say, like the offensive and defensive line play. So let's stipulate a scenario where UM does have a better day in the trenches versus IU, where their offensive defensive line does have a better outing than IU. But what if it isn't a total blowout?
Right.
What if it's more like a 54-46 kind of advantage, or 60, or even like 60-40, where Miami has a little bit more push on more plays than IU, but 4 out of 10 plays IU actually maybe has a little bit advantage in their play on the lines. Well, then what? Like, well, so if it's not a dominating performance by the front lines, where is the advantage going to come for UM? Is it a linebacker or quarterback, D-backs, wide receivers, coordinators, head coaching? I mean, where else are they going to go? And I think it goes to your point, what you said before, is that there are just more avenues for IU to be able to win this game without needing one particular variable to go their way. Yeah. Go ahead.
And you can still have a good line push, and your quarterback still just underthrows a receiver, and Pons takes it back for a pick six.
Yeah, exactly. Which is totally passable with Carson Beck. Yeah.
So yeah.
No, it's something that we kind of tell IU fans, like, yeah, look, Miami's good. They've got some parts of their team that are absolutely scary, but so does IU. And so you just don't really know how that's going to play out until the game is played. But just looking at it objectively, yeah, I think IU has a little bit more weapons than what Miami has, going forward. And again, if you do sort of the blind metrics test, if you take the numbers of where the rankings are for IU versus Miami, and you just took the names off, and you just looked at it and said, okay, I don't care what the names of these teams are, just knowing the correlation between the metrics and the outcome, which of these teams do I think has a better chance of winning? And you think of it like, Miami, you talked about like the Ole Miss game. Miami had 3.7 yards a rush versus Miami.
Yeah.
Or sorry, against Ole Miss. Ole Miss is 73rd in the country in rushing yards allowed per play. 73rd. Yeah. There's no way Miami can beat IU, I think, if they're under 4 yards a rush. And they were at 3.7 versus number 73 in the country, Mississippi's. IU's number 10 in the country at that. So you have to be much better than what you were in the Final Four semifinal. You have to be way above that against a much better team than what you just played against. So, and there's many other metrics that we've talked about before. It's like, I think Miami's probably the best chance they have to win is that they have to win third down, and they probably have to win the turnover battle. I don't think they can be even or lose at those.
No.
And IU's number one at both of those in the country. They're number one on third down conversions, and they're number one on turnover ratio. I think if Carson Beck screws up more than once in this game, it's going to be very hard for Miami to win.
So goes back to this whole thing, and that you look at the summation of it all. You look at the sum of the parts. You look at the whole situation, and you avoid, if you're so inclined, avoid the false drama that gets pushed into these games.
Yeah.
That avoid that sort of false choice that you're going to get in 4 hours of pregame coverage on ESPN. Just kind of put yourself in the mode of like, and don't let it freak you out, or let it freak you out in that way when IU wins a national football championship, it just feels all the better, I guess. Yeah. But whatever kind of works in that direction. But Mike, as we like to say, this is a show about decoding the winning formula in college basketball.
Yeah. What sport is that?
So it's the one with the round ball, and I have football guys that say anything with a round ball is just not valid. But I digress. I dispute that, and move on from the point. But it's I think that really it's a question of expectations that we're really talking about here. That it's reasonable to expect IU in year 2 of the Signetti era to be where they are based on what they've done and based on what they've built in this period. And I think that there's almost a dangerous, what you would call, comparison to where basketball is currently versus where football is currently, or even a year before now.
Yeah.
That IU fans in particular are kind of, it's a weird nexus to be at the point where we're going, there's a basketball game tonight. Oh wait, I'm too busy checking out which restaurant in Miami has the best Cuban sandwich.
Yeah.
And there is that sort of mindset that's kind of permeating in. I mean, reasonably speaking, I think we've been very upfront about where we thought this team was coming in. I don't think we ever really kind of oversold or undersold what was possible here.
Well, what we try to do is give ranges.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's always kind of been my analytical argument, is that there's sort of like a zone of confidence that you have where you say, okay, here's the upper limit, here's the lower limit. I think they're going to be, in here. And based upon what the team does in terms of like recruiting, kind of raises or lowers where that zone exists. So you're right. I mean, I think we said that, okay, if things really click the way they could, it could be like a 5 or 6 seed. And if things don't click very well, then this could be like a bubble team, or, not even in the tournament. So those are the range of possibilities.
And I think I said the highest that you could look at would be about 15th in the country. I mean, that was kind of my thing, that I would say a very low 4 or a high 5 is your absolute, and I thought that was an absolute ceiling.
Yeah.
And at this point, you're just kind of you're at this point you're playing within 1% of the margins on the conversation. I thought maybe the 6-7 would be a likely possibility, just because based on the schedule and based on how they shoot the basketball, it's still within range. I mean, you look at what Torvik has, based on their current resume and where they're at, they're saying 7. And at this point, someone's listening going, but I know, and you're exactly right, because last night and Nebraska both, where you had what's for this team has been an uncharacteristic meltdown late in the game. Like, there have been like lulls, problems, issues where they haven't scored for a period of time, where they've had let-ups that they've usually been able to paper over with defense. There have been some situations. There are plenty of times where this team does not look like they're firing on all cylinders, which is typical of most teams. Like Michigan State has been known for 3-4 minute droughts throughout the Izzo era. They just crack it down a little more on the defensive end, and they mitigate those losses. And last night, though, this was the first game that IU lost that was a 20-point boat raced out of the gym loss.
Yeah.
And that was on the heels of blowing a 16-point lead against Nebraska, where, again, those last 10 minutes, and they talked about this on the assembly call last night, and I agreed with that analysis right down the pike. But you saw another example of a program that just has struggled with, when things are going bad, where do you go?
Yeah, you're right. And I think the guys on the show last night on AC did a good job breaking it down. And it kind of dovetails with what we kind of laid out, I would say, sort of at the beginning of the year. Like, what does this team look like? I think this is a team that's full of really good shooters, like upper tier, sort of like guys that can like get the ball, put it in, like Dorn. Obviously Wilkerson, everyone knows I'm a huge Wilkerson fan since the day he signed. And and Tucker DeVries, and even some of the guys that are injured, I think that will come back, are actually better shooters than people kind of understand. So that was never a problem. I thought, okay, man, this team, if there was a game of horse as a national competition, this would be like a Final Four team. The problem is it's all the other stuff. It's that, okay, you obviously just have a real problem right now in terms of the ability to break down the defense on the drive with, let's say, multiple guys that can do that at the same time. And also just the lack of a general sort of like 5 big that can sort of either like, hoover in some defensive attention, or even play rim protector or rebounding. And so you just have sort of these like built-in deficits that we kind of knew coming in. We just didn't really know exactly to what extent that those deficits would really put a
Right.
ceiling on the team. So that's always hard to kind of gauge. I mean, sometimes you don't really know. There may be a guy that kind of comes along in the year and just kind of plays way above themselves and allows your team to maybe hit like the sort of upper echelon of your expected performance range. I think the problem with this team was that the way the roster was designed, as we're sort of like going through the calendar when the guys were sort of like signing, because remember, like it was Enright and DeVries were like they both signed, I think, the same day, right?
Right.
And then it was like Bailey came after that. Then so he kept going down. It was like,
Right.
oh man, that guy's a really good shooter and a great passer. Oh yeah, that guy's a really good shooter and a great passer. Oh yeah, the big, yeah, he can kind of shoot a little bit and pass a little bit. But he kept kind of going down. It's like, where are the drivers? Where are the guys who can like really create for themselves? And so as that kind of went on, you finally got Connerway. It's like, okay, good. They got one. All right, good. But then that was kind of it as time went by. And so my theory of like as the team was constructed is like, oh man, they're really going to put a lot on Connerway. Like he's going
Right.
to have the ball
Right.
a ton. They're going to be having him go downhill a lot because when you watch those West Virginia teams, when at the very beginning of last year, when West Virginia was at their best, when Tucker DeVries was healthy, what were they doing as far as offense?
Right.
They were they're setting high ball screens for Small, the point guard from West Virginia, who was really good, Indiana kid, by the way. They're getting Small to go downhill, getting paint touches, and either attacking the rim, kicking back to Hansberry for three, or kicking out to DeVries for three. I mean, it was a great setup that Darren DeVries had at that time, but it was really dependent upon that point guard getting in their lane consistently, or the threat of him getting in consistently.
Right.
And that's the one thing that's kind of like really confused me as far as like what we've seen so far is like, man, like, okay, if Connerway is your one driver and you don't have the post presence, that really kind of makes it very easy for the defense to know who to guard. And believe me, like the number one star probably on every scouting report against IU is make sure that Lamar Wilkerson does not get easy looks. That's probably number
Right.
one. Everyone, you could tell, like Nebraska was doing it, Michigan State was doing it. They are going after Lamar Wilkerson, making sure that kid is not going to kill us.
And Tucker DeVries.
And Tucker DeVries, yeah.
And Tucker
Obviously,
DeVries.
Tucker's a little bit off lately, but yeah, you're
Well,
right.
but how much?
Those are the
But
two guys. Those are the two guys that you're definitely
how
going to key in on.
how much of that was you're keying in on Tucker so much that it actually freed up Lamar, and now you're keying up on both of them, and IU is trying to figure out the solution.
Yeah,
That a lot of this, like we're talking about West Virginia last year. This is one thing to kind of keep in mind about where West Virginia ended up. And well, they didn't make the tournament. Yeah, well, Tucker was out. They had other injuries. Did Small ever get injured at one point? Wasn't Small? There was another
think
player
maybe.
that got,
I think I'm trying to remember who.
like
There was another injury. Yeah,
there was another injury that really kind of pushed them, and it's not an excuse when when you actually have one of your key weapons that's sitting there in a cast or in sweats.
yeah.
It's kind of an issue. It's like, well, why did the Colts make the playoff when Manning was injured? There's a reason.
Yeah.
Sorgy
Right.
is Sorgy. I mean, yes.
Be reasonable, people.
Be reasonable. That's a reasonable expectation. But when you talk about the first like 10 games of the season, when they're still trying to figure some things out, and your first actions are working extremely well, like those high ball screens were working extremely well early on because they had Tucker DeVries, and because because teams are still in that sort of pre-conference mode where they're able to, where a lot of those initial actions are working, a lot of those initial plays are working. And then the question was, well, let's say DeVries had stayed, that whole season, played the whole year, a player like him emerged, how would that offense continue to evolve? A lot of what's happening here is Darren DeVries, Coach DeVries, is having to scheme around that lack of penetration and also that lack of a big man who's could be utilized more as a scoring threat. The scary thing about Alexis and Bailey is not that they're limited. We know that. We can tell that by just looking at the numbers. Reed Bailey has done an amazing job this year of staying relatively efficient. As bad as some of the, like last night, he had another one where it's just like he went up and looked like a rag doll with a pit bull, just getting blasted inside. And then he came back to the next play. A couple plays later, he came back and either dunked it or he had an easy look. Yeah. But you look at their offensive ratings and you look at how they're shooting, what they're shooting in percentages with 2 points. I mean, this is still a relatively good 2-point shooting percentage team. Yeah. But they don't have the ability to get that shot whenever they want it. They have to be very selective when they're going up and shooting it. Yeah. At one point, I think I texted you my above the big rim, my kingdom for an above the big rim.
Yeah.
Because there was a play where Alexis had it and he was just almost, and he just couldn't, like he couldn't get the ball over the rim on a play that on one of those slips that was perfectly done. I mean, he was right there. Yeah. And so you have to be very selective. And even then they're selective. There's even times where the tag gets there to a point where Bailey or Alexis aren't quick enough or athletic enough to get up over the rim or to get the shot up over that even secondary rim protection.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, there's some of those plays. You're right. I mean, it's like
it's there. It's just it's just not there for that player. They just need a little more, and that's where you go to that next level.
Yeah. Well, it's like we were talking about last night. Our text exchanges, like so often when you're a team that maybe runs really good stuff, but maybe you're slightly limited in terms of like length, bulk, athleticism, hops, all that kind of stuff. You'll run plays in your practice all week that work.
Oh yeah.
The window of like the passing lane window when you run a certain action is like this. And then you go up against a team like Michigan State, who's faster, longer, stronger than you. Suddenly that window goes from this down to this. And you and
can't simulate it.
In the time that you have to make quick decisions in a game where the defense is kind of like just like scraping at you and you're going against guys that are really fast and can steal the ball from you. You don't have time to just sit there and ponder, wow, is this passing window open or not? No, you have to make immediate reactions. And yeah, in the practice, you make a play and suddenly the thing you think is open, nope, it's not open. And you still make the pass because you're just instinctively, it worked in practice. And suddenly, Jeremy Fears like takes it and goes the other way for an alley-oop dunk to Cohen Carr. I mean, it's that kind of stuff. You're right, is that you can run good stuff and it still may not work because you just don't, if there's a gap between you and the other team in terms of those kind of like those physical qualities and capabilities. Now, obviously, it's a little bit different if you're going against a team that's kind of equal to you. And there will be opportunities this year for IU where that's going to be true, where you're going up against a team that's not Michigan State. And a lot of those actions you run are probably going to be a little bit more open. You're going to create a little bit more shooting windows and passing lanes, that will not work against better teams.
So, and you bring up a great point because you talk about the practice thing, and there are plenty of times where coaching, you do this long enough, you start realizing, and you kind of you can actually stop your action or stop what's happening in practice and go, okay, look at what you just saw there. Mm-hmm. You got away with it here, and in a case like a Tate and Conaway, you may have gotten away with it throughout the preponderance of your career, or Lamar Wilkinson, the preponderance of your career.
Yeah,
but you've also had limited opportunities running against high major, top 2%, top 5% teams.
Right.
Where you haven't seen that window close as quickly. And all of a sudden you find yourself and you're underneath the backboard and I should be able to get up in the air against them. And I can't. I got 3 guys around me and I don't know where I should move the ball. So I guarantee you that this staff through film, not just film of games, but also practice film, are showing what also is out there. And we're going to do, again, like I said, after football ends, we've been promising a coaching show where we're going to break some stuff down. Yeah. We got to get bodies in, we got to kind of get everything. It's just,
we got to get them off South Beach first and then get them in the studio.
And we also know we want to give this the attention that it deserves. That's the other thing with this, is that we want to make sure we give that. But, you start noticing like there's a Reed Bailey level 2 where he gets stopped, and all of a sudden it's like, well, if he recognizes where that tag is, if you can just see that tag earlier coming over, there's a there's a Nick Dorn wide open, or there's a Trent Sisley wide open in that corner. And that's the play where he's a good enough passer to be able to rip it through and make that play out there. Because he's made that play hundreds of times in his career. He just has to recognize it a little earlier. And sometimes you've got to go through, was it Kazran Pass? I'm thinking of the first battle that Front and Hole screwed up in North Africa.
Exactly.
Sometimes you got to go to the Kazran Pass first before you can actually, beat Rommel at his own game and say, I read your book. That's kind of the whole thing where it's like you're learning by doing. This is not atypical for even very good teams to go through a week like this or a week and a half like this. Like Michigan, I put this up on the Discord, the Back Home Network Discord, which again, if you haven't liked and subscribed, like and subscribe. Yeah. If you check out the Substack, check out the Discord, a lot of great material that's and a lot of great conversation happens there for the Back Home Network. But there's the other part of this, which is Michigan had a 3-game skid right before the Big Ten tournament. Yeah. They got blown out at home by Illinois. I think at home by Illinois. And then they got blown out.
This is last year.
Season. Yeah. Last season, they had a 3-game skid. Some of Michigan's problems last year are similar to IU's. They didn't have a whole lot of penetration. I mean, they were relying on Danny Wolf.
Yeah. Basically, their 4 or 5, whatever you want to call it, their point forward was really their point guard in a way,
which is structurally similar to what IU runs with DeVries oftentimes. It's just the difference is that Danny Wolf was a couple inches taller and but even then, I mean, like he struggled at times to get the drive. Like he had to be very selective on,
and a lot of turnovers too.
And that's the other, exactly. So you have that issue to kind of balance out. I'm not saying we're Michigan last year by any stretch. What I'm saying is that you see that there are some similarities in some constructions, especially after 1 year quick turnaround that IU had to build. What are you going to prioritize in a short Porter window where you're jumping in fresh? They prioritized the shooting, whereas I think Michigan last year prioritized having Golden and Wolf and building around them and they also had pieces left over from the Juwan Howard era that could pack in a little bit, and they still have those pieces to this day, and they're performing at a very high level. Yeah, they lost their first game. You're going to lose some here and there. They also lost a big lead at home to Wisconsin, which is again not a typical type of outcome. But there is that thing where right now I think because first off, Lamar Wilkerson is having an amazing stretch ever since was it the Louisville? It was the Louisville game. Yeah. Right after that was Penn State. So from Penn State to now, Lamar Wilkerson is having a 9-0 type BPM season as a result of these last some of the work he did early, but really focused on what he's been doing now that he's jumping into that elite level that we thought he would be at.
Yeah, he's been some of these games he's well above 10 BPM in terms of his per game, averages. You're right.
And so at that point, when you start thinking that you're still not fully cemented as to who you are from an identity standpoint, because it's always a moving target. Like just when everything is perfect, that's when the thing spontaneously combusts. Like something has happened where then their defenses can adjust to just something you're doing, or you've changed just enough because this one variable has changed, like Lamar Wilkerson being at a 10. Yeah. That all of a sudden stuff that you were getting before, now your players almost instinctively start saying, he's our guy. Yeah. Some guys respond to it by going, I don't know how to respond because I think I was the guy before. I could have been.
I used to be the guy, but I'm not the guy.
I used to be the guy. I'm not the guy right now. Yeah. Other guys are, clearly this is our best shot. We have to go through him. So we're going to basically stop what we do in certain of habits of play, like looking at a defense and reading a defense. Now you're not looking for the best play. You're looking for the best player.
Yeah. Yeah. And there is kind of like pass hunting in some of the late clock situations. Like, where's Lamar? Come save us.
and that makes sense. Or early too, where they're actually forcing on actions where it's like that action has got to be there. Yeah. And there was one where Tucker had a back cut. It was a beautifully designed thing, but Bailey just kind of saw the offense, was running the play versus playing the game, and didn't see defense moving with Tucker to shorten that pass window you're talking about. And you can't simulate it in practice, but a lot of it is, what are you looking at? And I would say offensively, it seems like what they're looking at now is more tunnel visioned. They're more looking at their primary option. They're looking at, why is the set not working? It's not really even a set. They're not really running sets.
Yeah.
They're running conceptual actions. And I'm not sure, again, if it are they calling the flare? Are they calling the back cut? Some of them they are. Some of them I think they're flowing into. I can't tell you exactly how they're doing it, but whatever their principles of play are and their protocols are, they're almost overthinking it to the point where they're actually not following the foundational things they need to follow in order to get the ball where they need it to go.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's I think, as I mentioned with you last night when we were chatting on the text cord, it feels like at times when when you can't really generate easy offense, you don't have like a Zach Edey you can dump it into to, just collapse the defense and, spend all day shooting open threes or at the line.
Or
you don't have
Junior.
Yeah, exactly. You don't have elite guards that are just like completely collapsing the defense. You're just getting like easy kickouts to your open shooters. Like, you don't have that. We don't have that. Obviously, the options are kind of like narrowed, and it almost creates, I won't say like a sense of like desperation, but it feels like at times when they kind of run some of these actions, it's similar to like in a football game where there's that one trick play where the running back gets to throw the ball on a fake and they pitch it out to the running back and it's not open. Like the defensive backs are there, but in your head, you think, this is my chance. Like, I'm supposed to throw the ball here in this situation. And they toss it. And of course the safety picks it off. There are times where I feel like there's almost that sense that, oh, we're supposed to do this here. Like this screen is being set. This is where Breed slips to the basket. I'm supposed to get it to him. But the problem is it's covered, but I make the pass anyway. There was a play early on. I think luckily kind of IU got bailed out of it. It was exactly that. Conaway gets the high screen from Bailey. He sort of like semi-rejects it. Bailey does the slip. And just immediately as the slip happens, Conaway just tosses it to a spot. Luckily, Cooper grabs Bailey from behind and kind of spins him out. I think that's where he got his second foul.
Yeah.
But luckily he did, because it was not open. If Cooper had just kept his arm in and not even touched him, like Michigan State had that ball easily. And it was just, again, one of those like passes you think, okay, that was not even close to open. But it's just like, okay, here's the action. I have to make this pass. And so you kind of wonder, like, all right, you don't want to get them the sense that, okay, you just have to constantly recycle. Okay, that's not open, recycle, but that's kind of what you have to do in those situations. Like, look, if it's not open, it sucks. And yeah, you have to try to do something else. But I think that's just the hard thing when you have a difficulty creating easier shots from either, again, dominant post play or dominant dribble penetration. You kind of get into these kind of weird dilemmas like, all right, we have to make something happen, but this isn't open.
Well, and philosophically, when you hit when the idea was to come and say we have our best opportunities 12 seconds, less than 12 seconds in the shot clock.
Right.
Like, we're built on the premise that early offense is your best offense.
Mm.
And I agree. Generally, that's true. But we go back to the conversation about softening versus striking versus secondary building and actions. Cutting can be a striking action. IU uses cutting as a striking action. But cutting also has limits, because once you do it once, then when you do something like that one time, the next time the defense is more aware of it, which then means that they're pulling somebody off. I mean, I think I was telling you that's like the best way to kind of think about some of the off ball stuff I use running on the weak side, and that's another. I'll get to that. Remind me to get back to that part of it, because that's a problem.
Yeah.
And without kind of going in, like when you're on that weak side without the ball, think of it as 2-man game without a basketball. Where it's like, okay, at this point, is the screener going to pop is the screener going to like do you do a pick and pop with the ball, or are they going to roll or rim run basket, or are they going to just float down? What's the screenee? What's the guy receiving the screen going to do? Is he going to curl off, back cut, flare off?
Yeah.
how flex cut it in some cases if it's applicable.
Yeah.
And so you have all these different options that are now occupying the help side of the defense, by the way. That's part of it. Or a side of the defense that is very in tune. And when they're running like a DeVries and a Wilkerson or a DeVries and a Dorn with this, it's very effective because they have to respect both of them as shooters. So they really have to push out further on that help line to be able to cover that.
Yeah.
Well, if you've gone through all the cyclings and if you don't have it there, then it becomes a softening action. So then what's next?
Right.
And one of the problems I think IU runs into is that they don't really that they're now trying to once again refigure what's next after they've, like, initially when they were having problems like with the Louisville game and in the Minnesota game, they started incorporating more of the cutting. Now defenses are taking more of that away. So now what's the next piece of this? What do you have to do next to try to fix that issue? Because now that one thing that was working for 10 games is no longer as readily available to you as a quick bail.
Yeah.
And you have this 2-man game option over here. So now what do you now incorporate in that soften? Like you saw something against, I think it was Maryland, and they did it a couple times in the last couple games against Nebraska and Michigan State, where they would cut Wilkerson down off of a UCLA screen with an Alexis, and then he would flip the screen and he'd come back. So it was screen and rescreen, much like you would see a screen and rescreen on a ball screen. That's pretty heady stuff that they're running. That's interesting stuff that they're running because now the defense has got to now not just account for Wilkerson, bam, bam, but whatever help they're getting on that screen coverage where, okay, they're running Alexis's man is going to kind of cut off for a minute.
Yeah.
And then his man's battling through, and then all of a sudden he just hits him again. Well, if they jump that, then that leaves Alexis open for the slip.
Yeah,
so now you have multiple different things you can run off of that. But it's just one action out of a 65 possession, 70 possession game.
Yeah, you're right. And it's hard to just come up with those every time, right? Like, because, there's, I mean, you can, that's why,
not on a 12, not on an initial action. Like you just go down and do it once. Right.
Yeah, exactly. And also, and that's why ATOs are always so, oftentimes the best plays that the coach has is because, all right, after the timeout we can discuss this. Here's the special play that we've been kind of holding, and and you see DeVries runs some pretty good ATOs as well. But again, so many of the better teams, they don't really have to do that often because again they have the sort of like quote unquote easy access offense, dribble penetration. The big a dominant big is able to. Just like creates so much opening in terms of potential shooters and slashers and all that. But you're right, like, and it's tough. We're having, just want to transition a little bit maybe to sort of like another question we had about the roster last night on the Discord, the Back Home Network Discord. People are kind of like, after the game, obviously people are naturally upset and they're asking like, well, why is this roster the way it is? Why couldn't things have been done different? And one thing we kind of discussed and thinking about like going into next year, where you probably want to have at least some degree of optimism compared to where things are now, is the fact that this coaching staff, they're going to have a lot more time now than they had in the last cycle, where they're basically just coming in early as they could get in was basically mid-April last year, or this the prior season. When you're hired as a new coach in the modern era, you're coming in literally as the portal is opening, and you're trying to put a staff together at the same time as the portal is active, and other teams are basically draining the talent pool within the portal as it goes. IU kind of faced that a little bit this last year in constructing this roster as it is. You think about like just even putting the assistants together. I think Kenny Johnson came on board around like April 11th, April 12th. A big chunk of the best players that I think would have been available to IU to really take a look at, if you're thinking about like that other guard that maybe you would want for IU to have, that other attacking guard to be with Connerway, like Dalen Swain, Keyshawn Hall, those guys were off the board early April before IU even had a staff together. So if you're kind of like plotting this out, just understanding that there were limits that led to this roster as it exists. I think quite frankly, DeVries did a pretty decent job of putting together some pieces. And again, Lamar Wilkerson was literally one of the gems of this whole portal. I can tell you right now, Kentucky fans are pointing to the fact that Pope missed on Wilkerson is causing a lot of the biggest problems they have right now. It's like, if we had that guy,
the cheering we heard in Rupp Arena when Wilkerson got in foul trouble, when Wilkerson was evident of that. That fan base that educated fan base is still very bitter that they lost out on Lamar Wilkerson.
Yeah. And I think if they had him, it's like, I don't think that necessarily fixes all their problems, but a big chunk of their issues is, I think, really would have been in a much better shape if Lamar Wilkerson was playing for the Cats right now. So yeah, I think that's just like one little thing I want to note about looking into, like, where do we go from here? And obviously, that it doesn't mean like this season is basically cooked. I think we just kind of explaining to folks that there are obviously limits to what this team can do. And some of them are not going to be fixable right now. And you have to kind of look forward in terms of, okay, well, like going into year two, how can this work out? And I do think that if you look at the kind of players that DeVries has brought in terms of like his high school recruits, you think like Vaughn Carvalho and Prince Alexander Moody, some of these kids have a lot of the skills that right now IU doesn't have in great numbers. And I think if you look at the portal going forward in next year, I can almost guarantee you IU is going to be very active in going after some of the kind of guys I think that would hopefully help out this situation to change the dynamics of the roster in a way that actually makes IU function the way Bob and I are talking about, to basically have lane touches that open up for the shooters that you have on your roster. And I think that's definitely something to look forward to as far as once we get to April and May of this coming year.
One thing I wanted to quickly revisit was to talk about the weak side for just a moment, because there are some other things that when stuff is happening, when certain primary actions, on-ball actions even are happening, right, or one action is happening on one side, you're beginning to see the last couple games, especially during the meltdowns, that the other side, that both sides really aren't moving. Does that make sense? Like, yeah, you don't see the Villanova exchanges like you used to as much when Conaway may get an empty side ball screen.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Or Wilkerson or whomever. And part of that, I think, is as they're recalibrating in this lull. And you saw it at times, and Coach Tonsoni brought up a great point. I think it was Coach talking about, well, at halftime, they got into them, they figured some things out, they got the game back to a 53-53 tie, and then Michigan State just did one of the classic Izzo kill shots. I mean, just guillotined.
Yeah.
And by that point, they're looking like, again, it was Kazarine pass. It was you got obliterated, and your guys are now sitting there, going back and sleeping until 9 o'clock, and Patton has to show up.
Yeah.
And so the question is, when does does he go Patton this time with him? And whatever his methodology is, I'm sure that there are those conversations have been happening. There's no way these guys want to go through this again, sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I would go back to that weak side where it's like, this is a sum of all parts group, Mike, like you're saying.
Yeah.
You cannot, even though Wilkerson is performing at a 10 level, he only can perform at that level if everybody is a threat, and active.
Yeah,
you're not going to get him attracting the whole group. He is incredibly skilled at certain things, but he's good, average to good on a lot of others. And what that means is, like, if you're attacking the lane, like driving it, he doesn't have that sort of elite driver ability. Yeah. He can attack a closeout.
But he's more like a shooter.
But you're not going to put him into. You notice they don't run a whole lot of ball screens for Lamar Wilkerson because he's good. Yeah. And so there, and that kind of points to what DeVries is doing for the first time in his career, because I went back and checked all of his like how much IU gets off of cuts and off screens, and they're very effective in both. I might add, high percentiles in synergy. But this year, they're getting 11.7% of their looks or their possession enders off of cutting.
Okay.
And the median is much lower. I mean, it's a lower median, and they're getting about 8% off ball screening, which is lower and these are both in the high 90 percentiles of frequency on both of these.
On nationally
Which,
or his
as
career?
a summation nationally, we'll get to his career in a second.
Yeah,
because nationally those are high percentiles, but even in his career, so he's getting off of cutting and off ball screening 20% of his possession enders, which basically means like 20% of your looks are coming off of that.
Yeah.
In his career, his highest was, I think, his last year at Drake, where it was 14.2% combined, 9.8% and 4.4, and that's we're only talking 2 or 3 or 4 possessions, a game, but it's still significant because it's pointing to the point you're making, which is they're having to rely on sum of all parts activity versus individual playmaking.
Yeah.
And you ideally maybe 50-50. I mean, you need a balance of the two in order to be elite, I think.
Yeah.
Not everybody, and now it's like Wisconsin. Like Wisconsin and Purdue's another great example, even without Zach Edey, where they, a lot of their stuff they get off of very similar types of things. UConn, and I will say this, UConn has a very similar off cuts and off screens.
Yeah.
And that also means off the cuts, I might add, that also means that you also could get that out of a ball screen action or post play or ISO, because somebody who's coming over to help on that, you can get a back cut off of that and see that. And so there's a lot of this out here right now that is they're just not connected, fairly disjointed right now. And I think part of it is they're trying to figure out, okay, so what's our next counter to the counters that these programs are throwing at us?
Yeah.
And they don't have the ability to rely on, like we're talking about with this roster. They don't have that guy who can step into those positions. And the question is, I don't think they're really willing to give the keys up to Wilkerson at 5 seconds, whatever he's doing, just stop it, go get the ball and make something happen.
Right.
Or Connerway or DeVries, which I believe are your key three.
Yeah, no, and we identified those three as the keys to the season. Like if those guys can operate, the way we think they could, then you could hit about where you thought they were. But yeah, I think, just overall, it's tough. I really think it would have been very interesting. And this will be like an end of season conversation as for like the look back and look forward, as far as like, okay, well, what do you think the roster needs going forward? It would have been really interesting, I think, if they could have secured a 2-guard that was sort of like a driver attacker, not even an elite one, just like a really solid one. I think that would have really changed the dynamic of this offense in a way that would be disproportional even to the talent level of that particular player. Just having a guy that can hit, like, let's say 36, 37% from 3, but is at least like, above average in terms of like rim attack, dribble penetration, like a 6'4", 5-ish guy, decent vertical and all that. You see those guys all around, like the Big Ten and the SEC. Like, get one of those guys. And I think it would have opened up things for Wilkerson. I think DeVries would add more stuff. Dorn is going to be, I think, a really good like standstill corner shooter in a lot of certain actions. And I think it would have been really interesting if you could really just created more activity for him. So
let me throw something out on this, because I think you just described that player. His name's Tatum Connerway. He's not because you're thinking of Connerway as a lead, right?
Well, yeah, we'll see. But the assumption is that you have a functional Connerway there already, like at the one position. Because again, like my theory, like
I know what you're saying.
Like,
I'm just saying the guy you described was Tatum Connerway.
Yeah.
So what you needed on the other side was, again, someone who was more of an offensive scoring threat than Connor Enright.
Right.
If that helps.
Yeah, exactly. And well, it's interesting. Like if you think about this,
and I'm not knocking Enright by any stretch. I'm just saying that we're talking about is an additional scoring threat. Yeah,
exactly.
Go ahead, man. Sorry, I just wanted to.
No, absolutely no. You can almost see this experiment play out in reverse, because we're like, I used to think, oh God, it would be awesome if we could add a player that has that. Well, think about it, about a team that is actually having that subtracted for them right now. Louisville is that example. Yeah. Mikael Brown is taken off of Louisville. for the last 5 or 6 games, and Louisville's tanked. Like
Yeah.
Louisville's not the same team that IU faced a few weeks ago. With Mikael Brown out of the lineup now, Louisville had a pretty good balance between obviously the shooters and the attackers on their offense, and obviously they could augment and complement each other in their offense. You take Mikael Brown out of that mix, and suddenly they're off balance. It's too many shooters and not enough attackers, and their offense is just completely sputtered. As a little bit of a way you could kind of say with IU is like, yeah, if you had another attacker in there, if you had like a Mikael Brown type of dude in there that was just like, blitzing defenses and creating space for your shooters, then yeah, I mean, who knows how good this offense could have been. So you're right. It is sort of like assuming that, okay, you have that Conaway position and assuming that he can function where he's supposed to. Having two guys in there that can do that simultaneously really changes, what's possible for what your offense can initiate.
And maybe a guy that also has more wiggle per se versus just downhill.
Right, exactly. East to west versus just north south.
Right, where that east to west and again, Connor Enright is incredibly. I mean, if you look at the numbers for him, he is actually really good when he's hitting level 2 and level 3 actions. He's very selective where he's not, and the numbers play out where he's just not at a level that you would expect from a high major top 5% team starter.
Yeah,
is attacking and getting the ball into the paint.
Yeah,
occasionally doing it keeps the defense honest. It's kind of like the guy that hits 10 home runs a season. It's kind of like Tommy Herr hitting for power on the St. Louis Cardinals in '85. It's like, well, he got 100 RBIs, but but every once in a while he'll put one out of the park.
Right,
and that's not a knock on it, but honestly, I think for him, a lot of it for him just needs to be they need to scheme a little more for him to shoot from the perimeter. If you get him to shoot from the perimeter more, maybe you get some more closeout attacks. That I think is kind of the next incarnation.
Yeah,
Nick Dorn, you're not going to get him as a driver. He's going to be a cutter at best, and he's really not a 2-point shooter. So you're kind of limited there because I think a lot of the logic was, well, you put if you put Wilkerson and Conaway with a Dorn, with DeVries and Bailey Alexis in that sort of hybrid 5 that they're running, that in theory should work better, but you're also kind of limited with Dorn to a certain degree. And you have Enright kind of coming in for those 20, for his minutes spreading. And I think you kind of noticed that there was a lineup you saw against Nebraska that worked incredibly well with those two.
The first half end of the Nebraska game was Conaway, Dorn, Wilkerson, DeVries, Bailey, and that lineup went 9-2 to close out the half against Louisville. So they were +7 in the last 2.5, 3 minutes. So you're right. I think that configuration definitely worked. And yeah, I'll show you this when we're together. I took a screenshot of this on my phone. That there was a rotation against Nebraska where I'm not kidding, and it almost looked like deliberate, where Hoiberg left Enright wide open.
Oh,
not just like
I know
someone.
He doesn't even exist on
coverage.
The floor. He doesn't exist on the floor. I mean, there are teams that are scheming the way with Connor Enright where he's not even played. You're just here, and that's where you got to get production there one way or the other.
Yeah, and because you're right, like people ask, well, what's the big deal? He kind of moves the ball around, he makes the right decisions.
It's 4 on 5.
Exactly. You're basically in the penalty kill in hockey.
And because you don't have a guy that can really on their own command 2 on the ball.
Right.
It makes it almost impossible to really run what you're wanting to run.
Yeah.
Again, and I want to be clear, this is not a knock on Connor Enright by any stretch of the imagination. Yeah. It's more a question of, can they eke more utilization out of all 5 spots on the floor, and however that looks. And I would also add that this is not like what we've seen in the past with other types of lead guards that IU has had in the portal or the system. This isn't like a Rob Finney situation, I don't think, where I think Enright's a better game shooter and has produced that over the course of his career.
Mm.
Enright has produced more in many respects consistently than other leads that IU has run in the past. It's just, and those are just numerically where things are. So looking at that, and then I'm not on any of these players by any stretch, it's just kind of looking at this as to where do you go from here?
Yeah.
Where you go from here is you're going to have to start thinking of ways to get that productivity, whether it's through some lineup adjustments, whether it's through some schematic adjustments, but and you're seeing him pick up some more shots over the course of the game.
Right.
Now, I think he was 2 for 3 from 3 last night. That was, and that was
he
that
got
was,
two
that
early
was,
ones, which were good.
But as the game continues, and then he got in foul trouble, which caused some issues. I mean, it's also the thing of what you do more with Nick Dorn in those situations is also maybe you also start bumping Sicily's minutes to a certain degree, good, bad, or indifferent, because I think Sicily might be a better driver of the three basic wings that they have, the big wings they have. So Dorn, DeVries, Sicily. Of the three, I think Sicily's your most effective driver.
Probably, yeah. I mean, obviously, as a freshman, so freshmen are prone to do freshman things like, fumble the ball on a drive and things like that. But I think you're right. Maybe the way to put it, the ceiling for him to be a driver is maybe the best of those three.
And it's just, and maybe it's a thing they figure out before Iowa. Iowa's a little different. Iowa is not Michigan State. Remember, Michigan State beat Iowa by 18-19 in December back at Breslin.
Yeah.
That was mentioned last night on Assembly Call too, but it's like, it's not like bringing in this Howland team is going to,
McCollum.
Why do I call him Ben? Because I'm thinking Ben.
Yeah.
Tony
Adrani is never going to forgive you for that.
Look, hopefully Jalen Scruggs is still a really good, hopefully Paul Scruggs is still a really good swim instructor. I mean, it's one of those types of deals that we go through, but it's, for me, it's like, how do you solve the puzzle? And when you start talking, we're going to go back to our tagline, decoding the winning formula. This is a moving target. This is not you are what you are, you stay what you are from Halloween to Easter.
Yeah.
There's a constant back and forth. This is why coaches get paid $3.5 million a year to do their programs. It's why you have so many tools at their disposal to scout, to plan, to kind of plan what you're doing as you're going in real time. They call it a grind for a reason. And the psychology of your team is important. The culture you're building is important. All of these things are, I would say both of those are essential more than anything else. And, as disappointing as it is to watch a team just like walk off the court brutally defeated psychologically, like I felt like IU was on like last night.
Yeah.
And close to being in the collapse against Nebraska. And I mean, I began to talk about things like, switch protocols. Like, how is Enright? They're literally walking in like Wile E. Coyote on the switting with Kohler. You want to keep, it's like somebody.
I saw that twice last night. I'm like, what was that on purpose?
And if you're going to peel switch. If you're going to switch. If you're going to stay. But, have something in place where you at least can get somebody, maybe switch DeVries and, do something. But, a lot of this, I think, Mike, you hit the nail on the head where it's just there were some gaps in this roster, much like there were with Michigan last year, much like there definitely were with Louisville last year, I might add. Like I watched Chucky Hepburn try to will them a victory over Creighton. It didn't work.
Right.
In a tournament game, much like there even was with Kentucky a year ago. I mean, all three of those programs that we talk about and obviously West Virginia with the first-year coach last year. All four of those programs showed roster deficiencies based on the timelines of the portal and everything that kind of happened.
Yeah.
And three of the four were able to scheme enough to get into the tournament. The fourth was right on the bubble.
Yeah.
In spite of all the problems that Darren DeVries had at West Virginia last year. So you're not wrong that it's going to be instructive for us to watch the off-season, immediately going out of whenever the season ends and seeing what comes next. But I think a lot of it for IU is, there are going to be some games where they get physically outmatched. And if they're not in sync and or let me rephrase this: if they can't find a way to get themselves better synced for the game, they're going to have some struggles where they go to a place like Breslin and walk out of there with holding their hat.
Yeah. There's an interesting contrast between IU when they play against teams that are physically at their level or below versus teams that are above them. Now that sounds kind of corny because wasn't that true for everyone? I think that's true for everyone, except it's just more exaggerated with IU. It's like you see IU can go against a not so great Kansas State team and blow them out like they are a top 5 team. Like they can just literally hammer a team like that. And then they go against the Michigan State and they look like, oh man, they're nowhere near a top 5 team. That don't even look like a tournament team against Michigan State, And so that's just kind of like the odd contrast that I think you're right. And we talk about just the connectivity that kind of gets compromised when you go against certain kind of teams versus what's available to you against a team where, okay, well, maybe they're not as strong as Michigan State and you actually can run some of your stuff. So I think when we're together this coming Saturday, I guess,
we're going to see a lot.
Assembly Hall. Yeah,
we're going to see a lot.
It's going to be interesting. I'm glad it's the Iowa game because it's going to be.
Me too.
It's better than, let's say, if they were playing Michigan. If it's playing Michigan, I don't know if you could learn much from if Michigan was just going to completely do what Michigan might do after being upset in a home game. But I think against Iowa, you can kind of see, okay, well, we can really focus on the schematic kind of stuff and see the sort of like the offensive system versus just, okay, these guys are just getting completely manhandled by a team that's just much taller and stronger than them.
And I think it's important to keep in mind this one key element in both of these situations. You saw 2 games in the last 2 games that IU ran that played where the collapses were late,
mm-hmm.
but one collapse was definitely much more pronounced than the other. The other one was they basically just Nebraska found their level shooting the basketball and was able to do a lot of things like people talked a lot about off ball, on ball, paint touches. Oh, well, Nebraska got in the paint. How Nebraska was getting in the paint was they were actually doing cuts, instead of flares off of screens, they were doing a lot of curls and back cuts, which was softening the defense.
Yeah,
which are things that IU can learn to do can add more into the course of the season. They can add more of that.
Totally.
But that's a softening action. So I think when you kind of watch what happened there, they weren't able to score enough, and that's when you started seeing that tunnel vision going in with Wilkerson and DeVries. When they were the only 2 guys that scored for you, and they were producing 80% of your offense, you're easy to stop.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then the same thing's true against Michigan State when all of a sudden you're like, well, our stars have to bail us out. You all have to row in the rowboat, not to use a PJ Fleck crapism, but if you're trying to escape the Titanic, it's not just a guy. You just don't have the 2 sailors rowing the women out. Women row with them, and the guy in the dress, who would probably be me, row with them. Paddle out of there. So, on that note, you and I will be together with this, here in less than 48 hours.
Yeah.
At some point, we'll be getting close to deciding, when we actually want to get into the Briar and the Burley.
Yeah, exactly.
So, looking forward to seeing you and
the rest of our back home network friends. At least
of course,
a portion of them. I think Coach Tonsoni's being there. Andy's going to be there. Ryan's flying in, I think, and I think Galen might or might not be there for a fraction of it. We don't know yet. So we know Jared. Jared's the one we know is not going to be there.
Not going to be there.
Yeah.
I mean, Scott may be around. I don't know. I mean, a lot of it just depends. Yeah. Really, at this point, it's a matter. I think Galen may have cloned himself. He may have just split up in some sort of weird sci-fi thing.
I think he probably has to for all the podcasts he has to be on. So.
I mean, hardest working man in show business right there.
Yes, exactly.
I jokingly, the David Sarnoff of the Back Home Network, but it's in so many ways, he's, with him and, he he and Jared both, and the rest of going down there, having a great time. It's a special time, to say the least.
Absolutely.
And so
we wish them well. Yeah.
Wish them. We can't wait to see everybody. So
yeah.
On that note, thank you again for joining us. Special thanks to Bob Thompson for the music and sound of the show, and John Ringer of rigdesign.com for the logo and look of the show.
Yeah. And for next show, what are we thinking of, Bob? I think, well, I depending upon what happens in the football game, we're going to have,
I think we gotta get. I think we will be we'll be doing some weird stuff. We haven't really done some wacky stuff, to say the least. I mean, we've kind of gone weekly the last couple times, if for no other reason, because it's not like there's not a whole lot of content going on right now, right? But
exactly, yeah.
But no, I think we are going to talk about. We do want to go through some video stuff. And the problem, every time we get video stuff, we get more video every time we delay this a week.
Right. Yeah.
So it's a question. I've got to hone this down to probably 7 or 8 clips that I have that I just want to kind of go through, some statistical stuff to go through.
Yeah. We'll do video definitely on the coaching game. I know at some point we're probably going to have a conversation about. We've kind of done some outlining of this around Kirk Cignetti and sort of where does he fit in sort of the historical context of those questions about is he the greatest hire and all that kind of stuff. We'll try to do our best to actually provide some actual statistical modeling that answers that question as best we can.
I would agree, because that's definitely on the thing, because on the big list, because it transcends just one sport.
Yeah, exactly, and it also just the implications, of whether IU wins, on Monday or not. What happens going forward, and what have we seen in history of other programs that have kind of gone through this sort of transformation, and the good cases and the bad cases. So I think we'll have enough content that kind of flows from a lot of the content we've talked about before about chip stacks and program momentum and program prestige and all that kind of stuff. So we'll definitely have some stuff. We just don't know exactly when it will be coming out. So, but stay tuned because we'll keep you up to date on all that. So, it's all right. Yep. So this Endless Conversation was brought to you by the Back Home Network. Be sure to check out all the great BHN content, including the Assembly Call, Doing the Work, Dribble Drive, Big Red Carpet, Sideline Stories, Football Weather, and Crimson Cast on YouTube and backhomenetwork.com. So until next time, I'm Mike Wiemuth.
I'm Bob Moats.
Take care, everybody.